we've got Thursday Night Football, Week 15 between the Chargers and the Raiders, and I have my two favorite player props for you guys to lock in for this game. Admittedly, a pretty gross game that we have here, a total in the low 30s between two teams potentially starting backup quarterbacks, but that doesn't mean that there isn't value out there, and I was able to find two player props that I like quite a bit. Before we can get into Thursday Night Football, we do need to do a recap from Monday Night Football, which unfortunately was not our night. I gave out two picks on this YouTube channel, one of them for a full unit, one of them for just half a unit. We did not get any of those two pumped up props to cash. We end the day 0-2, down 1.5 units. Luckily, we are still squarely in the green on these pumped up props on the season, up 19.44 units with an ROI of 13.18%. Now, for Thursday Night Football, I will say I'm not going to have pumped up props. I'm just going to have two mainline plays that we're taking. Considering the circumstances of this game, I did not feel comfortable pumping anything up, and I didn't want to take something just for the sake of having it. So I did just want to preface that before we get into the picks. Real quick, if you're not already, would appreciate it if you could subscribe to my YouTube channel. And let's chat Thursday Night Football. So play number one, obviously Chargers versus Raiders game. I'm taking Easton Stick over 31.5 passing attempts, minus 110 odds at ESPN Bet. Now, before I get into this pick, I do just want to talk briefly about the game. I will admit, I really didn't know where to go with this game. This is like the third straight primetime game where it's really, really hard to dive into and decide where the value is and see where you want to go. This one specifically is really tough because, so I'm recording this on Wednesday. As of right now, we do not know who the starting quarterback is going to be for the Raiders. I thought it was going to be Aiden O'Connell, but reports recently have come out saying that Antonio Pierce is undecided and then he might go back to Jimmy G. Obviously, that would change things on the Raiders side. So for the time being, I'm sitting out on any Raiders props. On the other side of the ball, we have Easton Stick for the Chargers making his first career start after being an NFL backup for the past about 5 years or so. So it really is hard to know what to expect in this game. Now, sticking with Easton Stick, because obviously he is our first pick here, his counting stats from last week weren't terrible, especially in the second half. He threw for 176 yards in that second half, going 12 of 21 in that span, 21 passing attempts, completing 12. That's not terrible. Obviously, this isn't the most perfect math in the world, but if you extrapolate that second half out, it would be 42 passing attempts in the game. Now, that's not what I'm saying, what I'm expecting in this game. Majority of that game was already in garbage time with the Broncos playing prevent defense. So I do not expect him to have, to throw for 176 yards and a half. But he at least looked competent throwing the ball, which is better than we've seen from a lot of quarterbacks this year. What I do expect in this game, in a game that the Raiders are favored, is for the Raiders to relatively generally be leading the entire game. So I could see this being another situation where the Chargers are forced to throw the ball a ton. And you can throw on the Raiders. And then we're going to get into that in a little bit. But on the Chargers side, I don't think they really have a ground game to lean on. The running game has been terrible basically the entire year. That includes just looking at Eckler specifically, who really doesn't look the same ever since that ankle injury he suffered at the beginning of the year. He just hasn't looked like he's quite recovered. Overall, the Chargers are the 25th ranked rushing offense in the NFL. So this is a situation where I expect Easton Stick to be dropping back to pass a decent amount, hopefully getting us to 32 passing attempts for our first play. Next up, obviously the same game, another Easton Stick play. We're taking him over 190.5 passing yards, minus 114 odds at FanDuel. Now, right off the bat, I will say this is a situation where FanDuel is significantly below the rest of the market with how they're pricing his passing yards. Obviously, again, they're pricing it at 190.5, which is what we're taking it at. The next closest book prices this at 197.5. That's BetRivers. Every other book prices this at 199.5, roughly for even money, meaning minus 115 or so each way. They're not really pricing a difference, whether they think it's more likely that he goes over or under 199.5 passing yards. Going from 190 to 199 is a pretty big deal. It's a pretty sizable gap. Now, normally, I will admit, I get a little bit nervous when FanDuel is this much of an outlier, but in this case, I do think that it's worth pursuing. And obviously, there is a positive correlation here between Easton Stick passing attempts and passing yards. If he is throwing just a lot of attempts, he's more likely than not to also at least throw for a little bit of yards. And let's remember, 190 is a very, very low total. Obviously, he can still go under. Many quarterbacks have gone under 190.5 passing yards this year. It's just a very low total. And last week, as I mentioned, he threw for 176 passing yards in the second half. Yes, that was majority in garbage time, that whole half basically. Who's to say that they're not also going to be in garbage time in this game? And if he can at least move the ball and prevent defense, he's capable of doing it again this week as well. I also think that the Chargers are more likely than not to be in a deficit most of the game if Jimmy G ends up playing. I think if Jimmy G plays, that will favor the Raiders. Even if he doesn't, I would still favor the Raiders in this game. And as previously mentioned, you can throw on them. Now, their defense was good last week against the Vikings. Very good. Did not allow a single point. Shut out the Vikings. But prior to that, 4 out of the last 5 quarterbacks went over their passing yardage over-under. Now, that includes good quarterbacks like Mahomes and Tua. That also includes Zach Wilson, who stinks, who threw for 263 yards against the Raiders. So I think that Easton Stick will at least be able to move the ball, especially if they're losing the majority of the game, which I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Hopefully, I'm not going to say he can come through for us and have a good game. Hopefully, he just doesn't have a total disaster of a game and can get us to 190 or more than 190.5 passing yards as our second and final pick of the evening. It's a gross game, but I did find 2 plays that I legitimately liked. Not pumped up. I didn't have anything pumped up in this one, just 2 regular mainline plays. Again, let's hope we can get these 2 to cash. If you're riding with me, make sure to comment and let me know. Other than that, remember to like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Appreciate everybody for watching, and have a good one.